Your Majesty, Mr. President, members of Parliament, Excellencies, distinguished guests. I would like to extend to all of you a warm welcome to the Swedish Parliament and our beautiful former second chamber. On account of the ongoing pandemic, we're holding this event under slightly different forms, and I also want to welcome those of you who are following us remotely. Germany and Sweden have historical ties that dates centuries, even millennia back. Throughout history, we have had conflict and cooperation, exchanges of trade and culture. We have had relations of love and hate, and that has produced the relationship of today, a fruitful, interconnected relationship in a united Europe, in a globalized world. I imagine from the headline that President Steinmeier might put focus on the importance of science and research, knowledge and facts. This has always been important to highlight, but it is perhaps more important today than ever before. In the latest report of Global Innovation Index, both Sweden and Germany are among the top 10 on the ranking list. So we are friendly competitors, and I see us more like collaborators. I think the future lies in collaborating even more. One crucial question we as politicians must ask ourselves is what is needed to achieve innovation and inventions. This question is of course very complex, but let me make just one observation. The countries on top of the list are all democracies. Scientists have the possibility in our democracies to think outside the box, and they work in countries where academic freedom is protected. In Sweden, we are now celebrating 100 years of democracy. The Swedish Parliament has embarked on 4 years of celebrations from 2018 to 2022, 1 century after the first 5 women entered the Swedish Parliament. During these 100 years, Sweden made the journey from one of the poorest countries in Europe to one of the wealthiest. I am quite convinced that freedom of expression, academic freedom, rule of law and other features of democracy have played crucial roles in that development. And they have also played crucial roles in the development of the Europe we know today. So I think we're all eagerly looking forward to the President's speech, and I will give, without further ado, it is now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Some of you might be in need of the earphones, because I speak in German. Majestät, Herr
Your Majesty, Mr. President, members of Parliament, distinguished guests, thank you very much for your warm welcome to this House. Mr. President, to the very heart of Swedish democracy. My wife and I are most delighted to be able to accept His Majesty's invitation to travel to the Kingdom of Sweden on a state visit today, and we are more than thrilled by the warm hospitality that we're enjoying now. Sweden numbers among the Federal Republic of Germany's most important and closest partners. The origins of our ties stretch back far in history, right back to Hanseatic times. For over 400 years, the tower of the German church has risen above Stockholm's skyline, reminding us of our common history. It is the monument to and the symbol of our long and checkered common past. I would like to thank you for the great honor to be able to speak to you at the Swedish Riksdag today, a place that gives guests from Germany such an opportunity to experience the uniqueness and idiosyncrasy of Swedish democracy up close. For example, I have learned that the members of the Riksdag are not seated here in the chamber according to their parliamentary group, like in Germany, but by constituency. It is not your fellow party member who sits beside you, but rather your neighbor. As you know, regional identity continues to play an important role also in Germany, as you know, but we have yet to come up with this idea, ladies and gentlemen. Whether parliamentary business is conducted a bit more peacefully as a result is another matter. At any rate, this is a good example of how different our democracies are for all the unity we enjoy on fundamental issues, and of how much we can learn from one another still. Many Germans have long admired Sweden's social model, its great achievements in the area of gender equality, its forward-looking family policy and social cohesion. In the midst of social change and increasing fragmentation in the party system in our countries, we Germans admire the ability of Swedish politics to time and again forge stable coalitions and governments capable of taking action. If I consider the upcoming elections to the Bundestag in Germany, and I talked to some of you about it, then we might have to take a leaf out of this book in Berlin in the near future. Sweden's foreign policy also enjoys great respect in Germany, a foreign policy that, like almost no other, places inalienable human rights and the humanitarian imperative at the heart of its actions. This policy is often both a source of inspiration and a challenge for us Germans. In these increasingly rough times on the world stage, it is good to hold discussions also about this in a spirit of trust. How can and should we deal with the world as it is without losing sight of the objective of a better world at the same time? How can we, as democracies, strike the right balance between what is non-negotiable for us and what we have to negotiate with those who do not share our objectives and values? As you can see, we are excited to visit your country, and I speak for our entire delegation when I say that for us Germans, Sweden is a fascinating, a greatly admired country, not only touristically, but also socially and politically. We can learn a great deal from Sweden. Ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting in turbulent times. This applies not just to international policy. Our liberal democracy, with its welfare state, it's being challenged from both within and without. The world has long since ceased to revolve around Europe. Our way of life is no longer the unquestioned yardstick, an object of human desire and social development, if indeed it ever was. Not only our economy, but also our liberal democratic order is facing fierce international competition. Countries such as China and Russia want to prove that security and prosperity can also be attained without democracy and freedom. And vocal minorities here at home are fishing for votes by triggering authoritarian and identitarian reflexes. And they're pretending that there is also such a thing as a liberal form of democracy, something that I consider to be a contradiction in its terms. It's either liberal or it is not a democracy. The competition between political systems is also reflected in the competition between economic areas. Around the globe, major companies are emerging whose head offices are located neither in the US nor in the European Union. as well as major research institutes whose working languages is not necessarily English. With growing self-confident middle classes in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, an incredibly strong demand is growing. Along with it, of course, the supply of skilled professionals. The rich democracies around the Atlantic are not the only ones who are engaged in cutting-edge research and who are able to develop new technologies. On the contrary, others are further down the line when it comes to critical technologies of the future, such as semiconductors or battery cells. Innovation has long since ceased to be the exclusive purview of us Europeans. Now, this fierce competition is making itself felt in Europe, not only economically, but also socially and politically. Our prosperity and our competitiveness form the material basis for the strong social cohesion of which our countries are rightly proud. The welfare state is one of the most important achievements of Europe. It ensures balance in our societies when they are at risk of getting out of equilibrium. And it is precisely this balance that I'm talking about. This balance is coming under pressure in our two countries and throughout Europe. Everywhere we look, social milieus are changing ever more rapidly. Everywhere we look, there is migration and demographic change. Everywhere we look, the digital transformation and industrial change are turning the world of the work on its head. To my mind, migration and integrating migrants is the social question for Europe's future. And this is not only a challenge and a political minefield, but we also have to see that time and again it also holds a great opportunity. I, for one, am convinced that isolationism is not a clever way forward for a self-confident, strong, and globally competitive Europe. Isolation is not a solution. In short, ladies and gentlemen, our democracy is locked in a competition and it must deliver. It must prove its worth. When I consider the years and decades ahead of us, the great transformation that lies before us, then I see a triad of challenges. The more rigorous protection of the climate and environment, of course, while at the same time preserving our economic strength with innovation, and thirdly, the necessary social justice, without which the upheavals of the coming years will put social harmony at risk. It is within this triad of objectives that the success of our ambitions will be judged. It is within this triad that liberal democracy will prove that it withstands the test of time. Our countries, Sweden and Germany, are, in this threefold perspective, more like-minded than only few other countries in the world, and also better positioned than almost all others. Climate and environmental awareness are firmly established in our societies, and our industrial sectors are worldwide pioneers. Our research community is first class, and the roots of our welfare state run deep in both of our countries. All of this makes Sweden and Germany natural partners when it comes to developing convincing responses to the great challenges of our generation. And with this self-confidence, we can and should also inspire our partners in the European Union. When looking closely, we have something to offer the world. Europe needs this ambition, this passion for new ideas, and the unbridled will to help shape the world of tomorrow. And I believe this is what we need in these turbulent times. Only when Europe perceives innovation and transformation as a strength and not as a tiresome imposition will we keep ahead of the global competition indeed. Belief in progress has been a characteristic trait of Swedes and Germans for many decades. The confidence that we can make people's lives better thanks to innovation and inventive genius, and not only for the privileged few, but for everyone. This confidence, this passion for the future is something that we must preserve. And I believe, and I'm certain, we can inspire Europe with this too. Ladies and gentlemen, if Europe is supposed to be a continent of ideas, we really ought to be redrawing our maps already. Because when it comes to innovative power, Sweden is not situated on the northern fringes of the continent, but at the very heart of Europe. Swedish inventive genius has formed the whole world. Swedish academics are an integral part of a global network, and that's not just a recent development. Back in the Renaissance, in the earliest beginnings of European Enlightenment, Swedish and German reformers gathered in Wittenberg to discuss Martin Luther's theses. Our two countries' universities have enjoyed close ties for many centuries, and to this day, German students like to come to Sweden, and German scientists are keen to visit your country's institutes. The Nobel Awards have a global reputation, as does Swedish aviation and space industry. The day after tomorrow, we will visit the European Space and Sounding Rocket Range in the north of your country. Whoever has a smartphone in their pocket uses Swedish technology, including Bluetooth radio communications, which was largely developed in Sweden. Everyday objects such as Tetra Pak and pipe wrenchers are Swedish inventions. As intelligent furniture as well. As a German, I am, of course, particularly interested in the powerful Swedish automotive industry with regard to both existing cooperation, tomorrow we will be the guests of Scania, and the competition that keeps it alive. Sweden is a country of inventors, one of the most attractive countries for investment in the world. And, adding to this, it itself invests 3% of its economic power in research and development. Ladies and gentlemen, our innovation partnership is particularly close on an issue that is shaping our future like no other: climate change. I'm delighted to see the intensity with which our two countries are cooperating on this issue, whether in setting goals for CO2 reduction in Europe or in determining the climate policy focus of the COVID-19 Recovery Fund. Yet our country's efforts to make a fair contribution to limiting global warming go well indeed beyond this. Our companies, our enterprises are working on the e-mobility of the future and on obtaining renewable energy from hydroelectric and wind power. Sweden is building the largest wind farm in Europe and plans to produce the world's greenest battery. Moreover, we should not forget that thousands of young people in Sweden and Germany are going out into our streets and public squares and calling for even more ambitious goals and even more engagement in the area of climate change mitigation. And essentially, they are right, not only with their calls for us to act more quickly and more extensively, but also with regard to our future in global competition. Honourable members of Parliament, is it not the case that fighting climate change harbours a great opportunity for Europe? Aren't our ideas, our innovative potential, our capital most effectively invested in the areas of renewable energy, sustainable industry, climate-neutral mobility, environmentally safe lifestyles? Billions of people all over the world are striving for ownership and prosperity. And how could Europe better position itself in the competition between economic systems? What more worthwhile a contribution to the future of this world could we make than to offer all these people a way to live in prosperity without destroying their natural livelihoods. I believe, honourable members of Parliament, I believe that deep in their hearts, many people in Europe sense that such an approach could be a good path into our future, with skilled jobs, a booming industry, and leading research institutions. We as Europeans have the ability to develop a competitive option for the future and thereby do justice to the great task of transformation that we share. Many of our political initiatives are already working in this direction, and many of our enterprises are already planning with this goal in mind. Now it is up to our governments and parliaments to do everything they can to support this transformation and at the same time ensure that the necessary social policy is in place. I'm delighted that the European Commission has presented an ambitious program with the European Green Deal. And one thing is clear. The people in Europe expect the member states, with countries like Sweden and Germany leading the way, they expect that member states take concrete and substantial steps to tackle this major task. After all, future generations will judge us by our success, not by our pronouncements. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me say, when I look at the recent past, I have no doubt that we can succeed in this endeavor. The COVID-19 pandemic has tested our mettle like hardly any other crisis in recent decades. It has hit us hard, both as societies and as individuals. But there's one thing I want to put on the record today. We can be pleased and proud of how far solidarity in Europe has brought us, despite all the teething problems, and I'm well aware of them. Fortunately, we noticed at an early stage that neither Germany nor Sweden nor any other country could emerge strong and healthy from this crisis if our neighbours were not also strong and healthy. The solidarity demonstrated in procuring vaccines and the strong European Recovery Fund were urgently needed. Indeed, I believe that they have kept our united Europe alive. Our journeys through the pandemic differed, and I explicitly want to say that our journeys through the pandemic differed. In our individual countries, we wrestled to find the right strategy, and we Germans observed Sweden's approach continuously with great interest and lively debate. Yet, despite all the differences between our COVID-19 strategies, we have shared one fundamental conviction from the first day of the pandemic. The only successful way out of the pandemic in the long term is the way of science and medical research. I don't believe it's merely coincidence that two of the first available vaccines were largely developed and manufactured by companies from Germany and Sweden. No, this innovative power is not a special case of the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been the driving force behind our success for a long time, and is the reason for our conviction that we have something to offer to the world. If we keep proving that this is the case, if we take the lead in Europe in this area and pass on our enthusiasm to others, we will not only secure our prosperity, but we will also show the world that our liberal democracy based on social justice is alive and exerts a great attraction. Where could this be better illustrated than in this distinguished parliament? Democracy in Europe has a long tradition, and what's more, it has a future. Tack så mycket.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now the President has agreed to answer a couple of questions from members of Parliament. And first I would like to give the floor to Mr. Lars Hjälmered, Chair of the Committee on Trade and Commerce.
Your Majesty, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Herr Präsident, wir von der deutsch-schwedischen Parlamentarischen
We from the German-Swedish Parliamentary Association are delighted that you're present here today.
Mr. President, how he thinks we in Germany, in Sweden and in Europe can secure our position in the world. We have had a year dominated by the corona, but beyond the corona, the fierce competition facing our industry continues, and the competition is even increasing. Countries and regions around the world compete to secure necessary resources such as metals and minerals. Both the US and China are investing heavily in areas such as AI. And the fact that our industry succeeds is crucial for jobs and finances in Europe, as well as our potential from shifting towards sustainability and achieving environmental goals. So, what does Mr. President think we should do to secure Europe's role ahead? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please.
Ja, zunächst mal.
Well, first of all, allow me to thank you and the colleagues of the German-Swedish Parliamentary Association. I'd like to thank you most cordially for your work. You maintain many contacts on the political level, and from my own political and parliamentary work, of course, I know that, of course, human ties grow beyond legislative terms, and this is important indeed. I can only agree with your analysis. The political weights are shifting around the world, but of course we've also seen a shift of economic clout. China is an influential economic factor and has become a competitive partner. Whether it remains to be seen whether it remains a partnership in the long run. I hope that we will succeed to put aside the American, Chinese controversies. Chinese and Americans have to make an effort to put these differences aside, but Europe also needs to formulate its interests. We are interested in an international trade order that does not affect our economic model. I want to say with this, we need fair conditions, and of course these controversies are harmful, but of course trade barriers, limitations, customs, and many demands put forward by countries are an impediment indeed. Now, how can we position ourselves for the future? I believe by doing what I tried to lay out in my speech, to gather our confidence, our self-confidence to say, yes, there are new partners out there, competitors in the world, but that doesn't impede and destroys our opportunities and our capabilities. If we look at Europe, we are a region in the world which generates opportunities for investments to the tune of billions. And if we invest in the right areas in light of important technologies for the future, and we need to invest in these future-oriented technologies, I believe, as I said in my speech, that the transformation that lies ahead with a view to climate change around the Mediterranean, in almost all countries, we've seen wildfires threatening human lives, and at the same time we've seen inundations, we've seen floods that cost the lives of people. Climate change has led to extreme weather conditions, and this cannot leave us indifferent. No, we have to actually do more in the area of climate protection, fight against climate change. I hope that my message has reached you. We should not see this as a tedious imposition, but we should see the opportunities to shape this transformation in a way that it brings economic benefits by strengthening our innovative power, by actually focusing on our engineering, by focusing on our efforts to invest in modern economic sectors, by being better than others. And you mentioned one area. We need to catch up in one important area urgently, as far as Asia is concerned, but also the United States are concerned. In the digital realm, we have fallen behind. We have not caught up. But this is a debate that is important in our federal election campaign. It plays an important role. And I hope that we in Europe can make a joint effort and catch up and start catching up. We have not sufficiently done so in the past. There's not a lack of skills and knowledge. There's not a lack of objectives. But no, we have to look ahead and embark on this path and actually do more in the field of digitalization as far as research is concerned, but also as far as manufacturing is concerned in Europe. We need to do more. Close to the city of Dresden, I visited a manufacturing plant for semiconductors, which has the most modern manufacturing facilities. But when touring the plant, I learned that such a modern plant will not be able to actually compensate for the lack of semiconductors on the global market right now. So this is an area we have to become more autonomous and sovereign. But we are seeing a scarcity of resources on the international markets. We need to actually work hard, and we need to promote and actually invest more into manufacturing opportunities in Europe.
Second question goes to Mr. Hans Wallmark, Deputy Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Your Majesty, Your Excellency the President, ladies and gentlemen, one matter that has been the subject of much discussion in Sweden is Nord Stream 2. Yeah. There has been broad concern spanning all the parties represented in the Parliament that Europe is making itself more dependent on Russian fossil-based gas. It has been pointed out that Nord Stream may conflict with the EU's energy union. Secondly, there is a risk that the gas pipeline and where it is being laid can undermine the position of Ukraine, even though it can be noted that Germany and the United States have explained in an agreement how the Ukrainian situation can be safeguarded. In connection with the need for further EU sanctions against Russia because of the way Alexei Navalny is being treated, as well as the departures that are being made from human rights and freedoms, including calling some independent media foreign agents, there is a broad consensus in Sweden behind the thought that Nord Stream 2 can also be employed as part of the sanction process. So, in summary, there is a broad political agreement here in the Swedish Parliament that Nord Stream 2 conflicts with EU's energy union, is wrong from a climate change perspective as it concerns fossil-based gas, and is in conflict with our common interest regarding security policy in Europe. So, Mr. President, how do you see those objections from the Swedish Parliament? Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Sorry. Ja, keine einfache.
Well, that is not a simple question, but a question that I expected indeed. Thank you very much for posing this question. Well, you know, Nord Stream 2 was not just a matter of heated debate in Sweden, but in Germany as well, a matter of heated debate between East and Western Europe, but also a matter of debate between us and the United States of America. In my different capacities and functions, I visited Sweden previously. We had discussions with the Swedish government. I know about Swedish objections. I know very well about Sweden's opinion. Well, after a long debate, which was a matter of controversial debate across the Atlantic, we finally have reached an agreement together with the United States and the U.S. government that seeks to embark on a path leading out of this conflict. And that takes into account the different positions that exist in Europe, and hopefully will do so. And what I like to reiterate time and again is something that I want to repeat in the Swedish Parliament again. We share greater common interests. And we should not lose sight of these due to such differences of opinion and conflicts that we had in the past. We have embarked on a path together with the Americans that, of course, also makes us, of course, support Ukraine. And I hope that this is a path that, well, puts this conflict of the past to rest. I don't see any advantage in continuing this debate and this conflict. We have reached this agreement in the knowledge, knowing fully well that it does not live up to all expectations in Germany, in Ukraine, in Europe, and in the United States. But those who have reached and negotiated this agreement actually wanted to overcome the old conflicts, so one could turn to the energy policy and energy security in Europe.
Answering questions. We will now conclude this session and proceed to other points on your schedule. Thank you very much for attending.
Dankeschön. Meine